Welcome to Sculpture Vulture. I'm Lucy Branch, a sculptural conservator and author, bringing you a series of interviews with some amazing sculptors who inspire me, and I hope will do the same for you. You can see the photographs accompanying the interview, the episode show notes, and get a free novel from sculpturevulture.co.uk. Hello Sculpture Vultures, and thank you for joining me today. I hope you've had a good week. We have had quite a lot of fun. Fun stroke, sleep deprivation and hassle because we've had a new addition in our family. No, I haven't had another child. 3 is plenty, but we have got a gorgeous new puppy that's joined us. We already had a dog, so we're clearly completely mad to add another ball of crazy into our lives, but I must admit she is absolutely gorgeous, and my other dog is completely unimpressed with the general change in his routine and the madness over this little cute, cuddly creature, but it is a bit like living with a cute, cuddly vampire because it has the most sharp needle teeth. I might post a picture later in the week on the regular social media platforms if any of you are interested in seeing our cute vampire. In sculpture news, I can reveal the winner of the Emily Williamson statue campaign if you haven't heard. It was Eve Shepherd and her magnificent entry. I hope you all voted at the competition. I'm sure if you did, you saw and were impressed by Eve's entry. It was incredibly imaginative, as all her work is. And I think now the fundraising begins in earnest. I really hope everyone will donate. I've already donated and I'm desperate to see this wonderful monument made. Congratulations, Eve, if you're listening. You did a really grand job. Today on the podcast, I am interviewing the legendary James Butler. My conservation company, Antique Bronze, has the great pleasure of looking after some of his sculptures, including the memorial to the Fleet Air Arm in Embankment Gardens. This year we restored Field Marshal Earl Alexander of Tunis in Wellington Barracks, which is a really magnificent sculpture, definitely one that I'd own in the sculpture park of my dreams. He has had a marvellous and long career. As this interview goes out, he's 90 years old and still working. He has a full-size statue in his studio, which he actually says is not that large. He was elected a Royal Academician in 1972. He's a member of the Royal West of England Academy in 1980 and a Fellow of the Royal Society of British Sculptors in 1981. I began our conversation today by asking, have you always been creative?
I don't know, really. I suppose I have. I mean, I wasn't really creative until I was sort of about 15, 16, really. I mean, my father used to draw for me. I used to sit on his lap and he used to draw in the margin around the white margin around newspapers where there's no lettering. He used to draw me tigers and soldiers and things like that. And he was brilliant. I thought he was a wonderful artist in those days, but he wasn't really much good. But I did enjoy his drawings, and maybe that sort of got me going on military things. I don't know.
His career wasn't in art?
No. He was a docker, a stevedore. Okay. And he was away a lot of the time. He built a house down in Kent for my mother and me and my brother and sister. We didn't really see much of him because he was always away working. And then during the war, he was away. And after the war, he died. Unfortunately, he died quite young.
Shame.
Yeah, it was a shame. Yeah. My mum married again to a wonderful old boy who was an ex-cook in the army. And he was a great chap. And he looked after me and my brother beautifully well. He was a very nice, simple, nice chap.
And so when did you start getting interested in art?
Well, I went to grammar school down in Kent where I lived. near Maidstone. And so I went to a Maidstone grammar school to begin with. And we had a teacher there who took an interest in the arts. And he used to talk to me from time to time about making things and doing drawings and painting and stuff. So I thought I was going to be a painter. And when I left grammar school, I went to art school in Maidstone. And we had a splendid chap teaching there. He was teaching sculpture. And his name was Jock Stewart. He was Scottish, obviously. And he used to talk to me a lot about what I was doing. I don't think I was doing much good in those days, but at least he got me interested and excited about making sculpture. And then when I left the art school, oh no, that's right, he arranged for me to go up to St. Martin's. So I did a couple of years at St. Martin's Art School. And Jock Stewart, he came up as well. He was a member of staff, and he looked after me, and we used to talk a lot about sculpture. I'm thinking now, don't really reckon much to his sculpture. It was a bit too sweet and didn't quite work, but I was grateful to him for his interest in what I was doing. Then, of course, after that, when I left the art school, I got a job because I was quite handy with my hands and things. I got a job as a stone carver. And I worked for a group of Italians. They were running a small carving group. It was great. I mean, I really enjoyed working. It was early work in the morning from 8 o'clock till 5, working, carving all day. And I learned to copy work with using a pointing machine, which gave me various points in space. And I just enjoyed working there. And they were the Italian couple. There were two brothers. And their father had come over to England to work on the figure of Queen Victoria at Buckingham Palace. He was obviously an Italian. He worked on that, and then both his sons worked on it as well. And they became professional sculptors, carvers, stone carvers. And I got on well with them. I mean,
yes. Did you learn more doing that job than you did at art school?
Yeah, well, I think I did. I mean, they treated me like a sort of idiot, a young sculptor. They used to sort of take the mickey out of me all the time. But, I got used to that, and that was okay. But using a pointing machine, that was a very useful art to have. Then after the Queen's, we carved the Queen's Beasts at Kew Gardens. I think there's 6 of them. Anyway, they're in front of the Palm House at Kew Gardens. So I carved all those. They were on circular bases, and we had to leave the bases to trim up on the actual job when they were in situ. And so people used to walk by, because we used to use a newspaper folded to make a hat, to keep the dust out of your hair. There were 3 of us working on these pieces, and people walked by, because we were doing it in public. People would walk by and make a comment about the fact that we were a lot of Italians working there, So I learned really working on those carvings to really cut stone properly, and I was very much in debt to the Giudici brothers, who I work with a lot. There are a couple of other sculptors there. There was a young sculptor called Peter King, who I worked with. Peter King was building quite a reputation for himself. And he worked for Henry Moore, but he died young, very young. I don't know why, but he died young. I remember with him, this was the time of the 1951 exhibition. It was a great exhibition that we had. And I remember walking around with him. And he used to like a drink, and so did I in those days. He and I would go walk. I remember walking around the exhibition, absolutely plastered. I couldn't see anything straight. But I remember a sort of great miasma of movement and things of people. So that was my interest and understanding of the 1951 exhibition. I suppose I was about 20, something like that. And anyway, Peter King, who became a good friend, died young. A lot of people, now I'm talking to you, I'm realizing a lot of people have died that I knew. But he was a splendid chap. And he worked quite a lot for Henry Moore, did a lot of carving for Henry Moore.
Was the stone, did you like it as much as clay, or did it not appeal to you quite as much?
No, I liked stone.
Okay.
I liked it. It was good fun to work. I got so that I could handle it very well. I could carve and cut stone well. So that was one thing that I could do.
It's quite an unforgiving material, though, isn't it?
It is tricky, yeah, because once you cut it away, it's gone. You can't put it back again. But unfortunately, what happened is my boss, Jerry Giudici, he unfortunately died. And then out of the blue, I got a job to do a figure of President Kenyatta in Kenya. They shipped me out to Kenya to meet President Kenyatta. He was a wonderful bloke, treated me beautifully. They showed me into his private rooms in Government House. And he loves flowers. And the whole room was bedecked with flowers.
Wow.
And I could hear these footsteps coming closer to the room. And he came in and he was about my height. I'm not very tall, about 5'7" or whatever it is. And he was the same height as me, but he's very broad, very big chap. And he came walking towards me. And I thought he wasn't going to stop. I thought he was just going to walk. Anyway, I remember going back as if he was going to walk over me. And he said to me, "You're a sculptor?" I said, "Yes." He said, "We would like a statue of me." So I said, "Oh, that's wonderful." So he allowed me to take lots of photographs of him. And I came back to England and I started making, I printed out, I used to do a lot of photography in those days. And I printed out these images of President Kenyatta. Wonderful man, great head. And so I made this, it took me about a year to do, because it was twice life size. The first big figure I'd ever done in clay. And it was, I really loved doing it. I did it I used to live in Bedfordshire before we moved here. And it was an old school that we had. And the school building my studio was owned by a market gardener. And he had two great big double doors put on the back of the schoolroom. so he could drive lorries full of cabbages things into the school, into the room. I managed to set up a studio, and a couple of students who I'd worked with and I'd known when they were students at the art school, they needed a job. And so any job that I got, and they were mostly little commercial weird jobs, we used to share them between us. And we called out, so we had T-shirts made with, we never say no across here. We never said no.
It's a good attitude.
I did all sorts of commercial jobs. I mean, I did a figure for Madame Tussauds, a great tall figure of the tallest man. He was 9 feet tall. And I did a great big figure of him. And then they wanted reproductions to send. We sent reproductions of it to various around the world, Denmark and France. And we cast everyone in resin. And I painted it afterwards. And I would paint his coat and trousers. The unfortunate thing is that he wore a check jacket. And I had to paint a check jacket to make it look real. And I tell you, that took me a long time. I did it in the end, but I used to do anything that would come along, we would do.
Do you think that was the secret of your success? It's the fact that...
It might be. Yeah, it might be.
You kept the momentum up?
Yeah, I could do most things. Work in resin, work in metal, work in stone, so we could handle most materials. Anyway, I got this wonderful statue to do of President Kenyatta. And really that brought in enough money for me to pack in our little job and to try and do real great, really first-class work.
Yeah.
And so I got a job also to do a monument to the freedom fighters of Zambia. And that's in Lusaka. I did a portrait statue of Field Marshal Alexander that's in Wellington Barracks. Now that was great to do. I mean, that's twice life size. So I got used to working big. I used to crawl all over it like a sort of fly, have a scaffolding and crawl all over the piece. It was great to do. I loved doing it. And then I started getting commissions from other places. I did Richard III in Leicester. And they moved him, it was in Castle Gardens to begin with, but they moved him to the new, well, not the new, but the new setting for the figure of Richard III, which was outside the cathedral. And, I did another figure for Leicester at that time, the seamstress. They had sort of a lot of work that was done locally from various trades. And they wanted a figure of a seamstress who used to put things together and sew things up. And I did a figure of her. And so that's in Leicester. And I used my wife as a model. And it really was great to do. I loved it.
And so are you getting these commissions? Were people approaching you, or were you pitching for these jobs?
Oh, people approached me for these jobs. I mean, I was just surprised when I would suddenly get a letter saying, we would like so-and-so. Can you make this for us? And how long would it take? And how much would it be? And all that. I mean, I had to work out how much things cost.
How much time?
And time, yeah. But I had 2 or 3 things going on at the same time. I did some extra work for Madame Tussauds in those days. And I did a big statue of Christ that was based on a drawing or a painting done by Rembrandt. So I had to sort of check up on a lot of things and try and make a useful and intelligent sculpture from a sort of just an idea, you know.
And so was there anyone in the background promoting you, or was it just word of mouth that this was happening?
Just with a mouth. I had no one on my behalf. I have now. Work that began to dwindle a bit, and I thought it would be sensible to have. Well, I became a Royal Academician. That helped a lot to begin with. Unfortunately for me, I'm a figurative sculptor, and the Royal Academy, I'm afraid, no longer really looks after figurative sculptors. They're not really interested in what I do. So I thought I should find someone to stand up for me who's got a bit of cash. So I went and saw a chap called Chris Beatles, who's got a gallery in St James's. And he's a splendid chap. And so with him, he shows some of my work and he gets me the odd commission. And what he does is send some of my work to the Royal Academy for me so that I don't have to go through the whole business of doing it myself and also casting. So it's very useful and handy for me to have someone like Chris Beatles, who runs a gallery in St James's, and he flogs my stuff whenever he can. Takes a fair whack out of it, of course, but that's what galleries do.
Well, they've got to eat as well.
Well, I'm sorry about that. That's what they do.
And so tell me a little bit about what your day's like, James. How do you get into the creative flow of the work? Do you have to warm up like a jogger?
No, I don't. I don't have to warm up. Because my studio is bloody cold in the winter time. But so warm up by putting new jackets on and things. I've been very fortunate. I've just got I'm 90 now. In a couple of weeks, I'm 90.
Are you 90?
Huh.
Well,
So
I'd seen that your career was very long, and you're a similar sort of age to what my father. I've lost him a few years ago, but the thing is that I thought that maybe you might know each other, have been around this, because he was a restorer, but he worked at Morris Singer when he was a young man, and was he patinated for many of the prolific sort of Henry Moore, and he was great friends with Barbara Hepworth. So I wasn't quite sure how old you were.
well, I'm 9. I'm in on the 25th of July, just a couple of weeks' time, I'll be 90. And my kids
Very good.
are all getting excited about. They've told me they're going to take me around London. They're going to hire a van or a car or whatever, and we're going to visit all my sculptures in London.
Magnificent idea.
It'll be really enjoyable. I haven't seen so many, especially the one in the barracks.
Yeah.
I haven't seen any of them for such a long time.
My dad always said, he said, I'll never retire. He was in the studio, even a couple of days before he left us. But he said, I'm not one for retiring. Just keep me working.
Well, that's the way I feel. Although I'm getting weaker. I'm not. I used to be quite strong, but time is sort of taking my strength away from me. Yeah. But anyway, I'm still working.
Yeah.
I've got an interesting commission to do now. It's a portrait of an elderly gentleman who he's very religious. He's seated on a rock and he's looking towards this religious building. He's thanking God for his help.
Is it going to be huge?
No, it's going to be life size.
That's pretty big.
Oh, to me,
not compared to what you do. I know normally. James, has there been a project that you've stood back and thought, you know what, if I never work again, that's good enough?
I've never really quite thought that, but I did have a wonderful job to do. It was for an American, and he came over to England. He was very much interested in the work of what's his name? God, I've forgotten his name. It's a chap who did the figure of the Great Gun in Hyde Park Corner.
Oh, Jagger.
Jagger, yeah, Jagger. He thinks the world of Jagger, and he came over to England because he thought he'd seen something of Jagger in my work, you see. And he was a splendid chap, this American. He was an ex-army man. And he came over to see me, and he was looking around my studio, and he saw a sketch on that I had pinned on the wall. It was an idea I had of a soldier holding a dead comrade in his arms, as if he picked him up off the, battle floor and was taking him wherever. And so he loved this idea, and it made me think of it much more deeply than I had before. And so I made it for him. He paid me to make it twice life size. Wow. A figure of a soldier, American soldier, First World War, all the gear, rifle and everything. And I'd imagined that he was like an angel, that he'd come down from heaven and he'd picked up a body of one of his soldiers, and he was taking him up to heaven. That's what I had in my mind when I was modelling it.
You think of the Pietà, don't you?
It's like a Pietà. It's not really.
No.
It was a figure of a soldier carrying another soldier.
A military version.
Yeah, that's right. Because I was, completely moved by the idea. I just loved working on it. And I worked on it for over a year. And then we cast it. And then they wanted another casting. It was in front in the foyer, in the front of the RA. Being a member of the RA, I am allowed to send in the work, and it's usually put, in a reasonable place. Not anymore, but it was put in those days in a reasonable place, and it was in the forecourt of the RA, and it caused a lot of interest. And I took my American there, and we had lunch at the RA, and he saw my big statue, and then he shipped it out to America. And Angie, my wife, and I, we went out as well to set it up in America, and it was great fun to do, great fun. And I got to know a few American Army generals, masses of medals all over them, and it was good fun. I really enjoyed it. And then he wanted another one. He wanted it for France. In fact, I got it around the wrong way. He wanted the one in France first. Okay. So we set it up in France on the battlefield. His father was injured, very badly injured, on the field in America where they fought. It was called the Rainbow Division. This particular group of American soldiers were given the name the Rainbow by a general. He said, these men are from America like the rainbow. And he spread his arms like a rainbow. And the men were given a special little flash on their shoulders, like a rainbow, curving with 3 or 4 colours, or whatever, 3 colours. Anyway, it became a really important fighting group, the Rainbow Soldiers. And my statue is called the Rainbow Division. And he's in France. And then after that, we set up this same piece, had another casting made in America. So that was I suppose that's my favorite piece, or my most wonderful piece, the piece I was so knocked out by doing. And I did it pretty almost by myself. And I had some help building the armature. So that was done in my studio here. And I just loved working on it. It was just amazing. I've got photographs of me sort of with the job half done and me hanging off the scaffolding, because I had to build a scaffold around it to maybe be able to reach the head.
So, James, if you had your time again,
Yeah.
would you do it again? Would you be a sculptor again, or would you go with something completely different?
No, I do the whole bloody same thing all over again.
Good for you. So it's been good to you as a career.
It has, yeah. Well, now I'm getting old, and I'm getting weaker. I don't think I could handle something that size anymore, but I would try. But I can handle a life-size piece, which I'm going to do. But it's a problem with aging.
For all of us, not just you.
You're lovely and young. But,
hardly.
What do you mean hardly? You're not 90 years old, for God's sake, are you?
Sometimes feel like it after a day's work.
Feel like it. Anyway, it's lovely to talk to you about my work. It's very nice that you chose me.
All the way through James's interview, I had this huge grin plastered on my face, because although we've never met, James felt so familiar to me. Of course, I've worked on his sculpture, which gives you a funny kind of bond to an artist, but he also comes from the same world that my father did, and so much of his energy, experiences, attitude had similarities. I recognise the world that James talks about, with fashioning hats from newspaper during jobs on site, and we've been known to do that with mutton cloth, and there'll definitely be a scene in one of my future novels about two sculptors wandering around the Festival of Britain, a smidge over the line of sober. Without fail during an interview, there's always a nugget to discover that opens up a sculptor's work for you so that you see it with new eyes. And James has just proven that point yet again. Anyone can see that he's an incredibly skilled sculptor, but it takes more than that to achieve what James has done. And by listening to him tell you about his journey, it's abundantly clear that James is a storyteller. And it just so happens that in his daily life, he does that with his very skilled hands. And just as he has done today, he draws us in and captivates us with his work. In those early days, James tells us about the secret of his success. We never said no was his mantra. Some would say, well, you're going to get an awful lot of rubbish work that way if you're not choosy. And I'm sure that there was a couple of jobs in there that maybe weren't quite the merit of the kind of later work he's done. But the momentum of all those little jobs took him to a place where he was offered the great opportunities that he was worthy of. And we shouldn't discount those lesser jobs either. Each project or job teaches us something and it hones our skills. It's an opportunity to practice so that when we need them, they're there, they're at our fingertips. And the icing on the cake is that they pay the bills as well. So whether in your own career you're someone that never says no, or you're more of a pick and choose type, James has certainly done something right in his career. He leaves a staggering number of first-class statues in the public domain, and he says if he had his time over again, he'd do it exactly the same way. Please support the show in one of 3 ways. By buying one of my novels. You're going to love them. They're all about sculpture. Or by rating the show on any of the apps that you listen to. Now, quite a few people have said to me, I can't make this work. How on earth do you do this sort of rating and reviewing business? And although I have to say I can only give you advice based on my own experience, in my app that I listen to the podcasts, there is a library section where the different podcasts you listen to are held, and I go in there, click on my own podcast or anyone else's if I'm going to rate it, and if you scroll down there is a rate and review option, and hopefully that will make it easier for you. And the final way that you can help me out is by telling someone about the show. And I would really appreciate this. Everyone I've come across who's listened to the show has been so kind about it. And we want to spread the word. We want to get these interviews out to as many people as possible and get them thinking about their wonderful sculpture in public places. So please don't think it's unimportant to do it that way. It's so important and I really appreciate it. Next episode, David William Ellis is being interviewed. His sculptures are inspired by the romanticism of Rodin and Bourdelle. They're noted for their classical balance and poise, and above all, a sense of movement and vitality captured within the form. His work can be seen all over the world in public spaces, and you are definitely going to want to listen to his story. He is incredibly engaging. Tune in for the next episode to be inspired by David. If you're looking for a new book, please consider one of my novels about the dark side of the art world, where sculpture is always at the heart of the story. You can get them on the show website, on the usual online retailers, or even better, keep your local library alive, ask for them in there. Thank you for joining me today. Sculpture Vulture has been brought to you by Antique Bronze.